My guest today is game designer Yitzi Santer.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the show where we dive into history, filmmaking, writing, RPGs, stories, and much, much more so we can become better game masters and better role players. I am the author of RPG resource books, which you can find at dicegeeks.com. You can find them on Amazon and Drive-Thru RPG as well. You can just search for Dice Geeks or Random Tables. I'm the Random Tables guy, so you can just search for those and you should be able to find some. Now, today's show, my guest and I dive into the creation of his original tabletop role-playing game. Stick around. My guest today is the creator of the Soulshards tabletop RPG, Yitzi Santer. Yitzi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Now, before we dive into Soulshards a bit, could you just tell the listeners, when were you introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
I was introduced in a rather unexpected way. I was sitting in the library at college, minding my own business, when suddenly a guy kind of wandered over to me and said, "You, come with me. We're short a guy." I then found out that they were short a guy to play D&D. And they helped me quickly make my first character, which ended up being a wizard who had 17 strength and only 11 int, as no one was overly familiar with the game. And we then went into playing, as I found my character rather ineffective. Mm-hmm. But it was definitely a unique situation. I'd never done anything of the type before, and I met some great people through the process in just the most bizarre of circumstances. But it was awesome.
Then I guess you continued to play then?
Yeah, they definitely got me hooked. I continued through a few different series, definitely played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, tried Pathfinder for a while, some Fate, Deadlands, and a splattering of miscellaneous games along the way. Though most of my years were spent in Pathfinder and participated in Pathfinder Society. And eventually the group seemed to not appreciate my power gaming style. And yeah, so I started moving more towards home games after that.
Okay, so you're a power gamer?
I used to be, yeah. It was a small addiction I had for a while. I would spend 20 hours building any given character, and people didn't tend to appreciate that, which was one of the main things that led me into Soulshards.
Oh, 20 hours?
Yeah, pretty easily. I'd spend every second perfectly optimizing the entire character. And even in a low-level build, I would develop the entire rest of the character for future decisions so that I'd be ready.
Wow.
It was a problem.
Are you recovering, you said?
I believe I have broken that problem, and that was one of the core concepts that I built into Soulshards, ensuring that power gaming is not really a thing. One, to help myself, and two, to help the overall concept of role-playing, as I've seen many players be extremely dissatisfied when an individual chooses to play differently than the rest of the table. So we've attempted to remove that feature so that everyone can participate in the same way.
Could you just give us maybe just a quick overview? What is Soulshards?
Absolutely. So Soulshards was built with a couple key concepts in mind. One of them, as mentioned, the power gaming being ruled out. Secondly, we have the rules are as simplified as possible while being completely versatile. We keep you down to really 12 basic attributes called skills that allow you to determine how many dice you roll for any given action. And then we have the versatile ability system, which allows you to completely customize your character. Everything on your character sheet is either based off of one of those 12 skills that you start with or an ability that you pick up as you go. Each individual ability will represent a single feature, a spell you can cast, a single attribute you've enhanced, and you get to just completely develop your character to be absolutely anything as you continue. You don't gain anything inherently by leveling up. So it allows you to really bring in any kind of concept. We have players who play your standard role-playing hero. We have guys who play merchants. We had a guy just yesterday came in, decided to play Batman. he could do that. It worked just fine. So really allowing complete customization so that you can have fun in the style you choose while still fitting in at the table with everyone else who has done the same was really a primary goal with the game.
What dice does it use? Does it use the standard RPG dice or just one type of dice?
It is entirely D12s.
Okay.
So we've tried to optimize with the rules being simpler, faster gameplay, no more hunting down different dice in the bottom of your bag, and very minimal math as well. When you make a roll, you'll usually have 1 to 3 dice early on. You might get 4 or 5 later. When you roll, you look for your highest number, and that's your result. There's also not a lot of target numbers to memorize because most rolls are opposed. So if you're taking action against another enemy, you each roll, and whoever rolls higher wins. Offensive player always wins on a tie. There's a couple of modifiers to be had here or there for +1 or -1, but usually calculating your result is very quick.
You were mentioning different attributes and how you can customize your character. Could you maybe just go into a little bit more detail with that? Like, so there are no classes, or how does that work?
That's correct. There are absolutely no classes to be had. There are affinities that you can choose along with character creation. You get to pick 2 out of the 36 available. They will give you specialties that allow you to advance further in those specific categories. However, the system is built with a number of individual abilities that represent anything you can do with your character, and you can take any of them with a handful that have certain requirements. So say you want to wield a great sword, no lightning bolt, you could simply make sure that your skill tier, your martial skill, is high enough, which requires a 3 to match a greatsword. Then spend 1 of your XP. You start with 6, you gain a couple every session to learn lightning bolt. And then if you want to learn fireball, you spend 1 XP and learn fireball. And then you want to learn how to speak to trees. You spend 1 XP and you learn how to speak to trees. And then you spend 1 XP and suddenly you can see in the dark. Any which combination of abilities you want, you simply apply a couple of XP towards that category and you have it. Certain more advanced features like being a wizard, someone who specializes in specific magical tools, you can still spend 1 XP on that, but you must meet the prerequisite of having the generic requirement 6 spells, any 6 spells from the game. So you have to dedicate yourself towards magical features, and then you lock certain stronger abilities. Affinities include different elements or styles of combat. So you can have an air affinity, which will allow you to take any of the air abilities that you learn and make them stronger than any non-air abilities that you might learn. And just for being air affinity, you get a little bit of a bonus ability. It has the function to allow you to redirect ranged attacks that target you towards someone next to you. Something that no one else can do, regardless of what they learn. Each affinity has a little bit of a special bonus to help you along that route, but it doesn't limit what you can take later.
I get a sense from what you're saying here. So then the ability tree must have many, many different options.
Yes. We currently have over 1,000 different options available to all players. They are broken into categories for when they activate, such as aspects that are always active, various categories of spells, such as creation, infusion, mutations. There's tricks and responses that are small actions you can do in addition to your prime action each turn, which would usually be an offensive action or a spell. Augments that allow you to modify any existing ability, as well as rituals, which are giant spells that take a half hour to cast, but have the biggest results. So by going through each of those categories, you can blend them together to create the character the way you want.
Even though there aren't classes, there is leveling?
So you can level up. Each session rewards you a couple of XP. After you've spent 12 XP on abilities, your character will level up. It serves one purpose. Each ability that you know and learn can be advanced through training. You can train any ability as many times as your level. You begin as level 0, which means you cannot train your ability. Once you reach level 1 after spending your first 12 XP, you can now spend 1 additional XP to train any ability you have. So say you learn Fireball. It deals a little bit of damage. It has a short range. Once you train it, it will gain a greater range. It will also increase the ability for it to cause burning so that you can get your ongoing damage. Each ability has its own function of leveling it up through training. Certain teleportations will increase how far you can teleport. Certain enhancements like gaining damage reduction, you'll gain more and more damage reduction as you train them. But you can't train greater than your level. With the exception of things you have affinity with, you treat your level as one higher.
How long does it take to make a character?
Experienced players seem to be making characters in about 10 minutes at this point, unless they want to be specifically picky about every feature, in which case we've seen people spend an hour or two when they're trying to be exactly. Though new players who are coming in tend to take about half an hour, as long as someone's there to introduce them to the system initially. We had a couple of people do that just yesterday. And for a couple of people who have attempted without any guidance, I was told it took about an hour when they simply went directly to the website with no information beforehand.
Is there a specific setting for the world that you play in?
So it is a standard fantasy world, very comparable to Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. You've got your fantasy adventurers going around slaying beasts, trying to be heroes or villains if you choose to be. The rules are fully accessible for that. However, the system has been built to allow any world to fall into place, though I usually prefer the fantasy realm. We have several sessions each week that each individual person running the games, our game masters go title Soul Weaver. Each one of them has their own style. Our game is usually based on horror adventures currently. That's run by someone who usually played Call of Cthulhu, so he's taken that scenario style into. Our Saturday games are entirely within the Soulshards realm, following all of them presented on our website, where we have our own kingdom and various individual characters and mystical objects to interact with. And then we also have on Sundays someone who's brought us into a more technologically advanced realm where you can pick up your firearms and still interact with the old equipment at the same time, and kind of blends everything together. So the game is extremely versatile to match any style that you choose, though the one that I'm currently pushing and writing a novel to go along with as well is the fantasy realm.
Okay, so you're writing a novel as well?
Yes, we have a couple different people who have been working on lore in various ways. One of them is really taking the lead, and we are currently about 4.5 chapters into the first of the novels. We hope to have a series to go along with everything that really lets you delve into the world, but it's a work in progress, and I'm anxious to be able to share parts of that with everyone once we get it a little bit more.
What gave you the initial kind of idea to create this, and then how long have you been working on it?
I'd been playing I'd been running a Pathfinder adventure, and I decided, based off of just kind of the group that I was with, everyone was getting kind of bored with the same old characters where we always end up using the same classes for each individual person, and all our characters felt very familiar at that point. I decided to add in a couple of features to the game, house ruled some stuff, allowing us to further customize our characters by adding in animal and element alignments. So you would each character choose one of each, an animal and an element, and anytime you did something to role play something relative to your animal or element, you would gain XP in that feature, and then be able to create custom abilities based off of how you were role playing. So when we finally reached the end of that campaign, everyone had loved how that system went and realized that they really wanted the ability to customize their characters more than we were finding within the Pathfinder realm and what we could find in any of the systems that we considered playing. And so they kind of talked about it, and I had just this thought, I think we can do better. I already kind of made these custom rules. Let's take it a little bit further. And it ended up becoming just its own project, further away than what Pathfinder had been, as we kind of figured that the classes could be blended together in different ways, and we tried eliminating the classes. And I didn't realize I was getting into this giant project initially. I thought it would be a month, 2 months, we'd have this little side game and we'd play it for fun. And the bigger it got, the more people saw it, and they said we would need more. It's working. So that's been a little over 3 years now that we just keep adding piece after piece. And about 1.5 years ago, we realized it needed to actually be a real project, and we started taking it into the stores and doing public play testing, and it seems to be growing. So obviously something about this is going well. But it really was just we couldn't find another game system that let us do exactly what we wanted for character customization.
I assume that there are different races, kind of like in standard fantasy worlds.
Yes, we currently have 30 races to pick from.
30?
And on top of simply choosing your race, you can also choose a second race to be a half-breed if you so desire.
Oh.
Being a full-blooded race will give you a benefit of being full-blooded, which is usually inherently very strong, versus if you take half-blooded, you will not gain that special bonus, but instead have versatility. You will gain the language of your second race and access to all of that race's traits. Each one has 8 abilities that are custom specifically to that race. So by picking 2 races, you have access to 16 separate abilities instead of just the 8. But base abilities that really exceed what you can get elsewhere, such as the cat fused, which is your basic cat type person, someone who had the soul of a cat blended into themselves. Their full-blooded ability reduces any fall by 6 spaces. So being able to just jump off a building, nobody notices. Whereas something like the pixie, your very small creature that has wings, of course, immediately learns how to fly and gains 4 energy points, which are used for spell casting. So sometimes you can get some significant abilities just by picking your races correctly.
Why is the game called Soulshards?
The magic in the world is based off of using soul energy. And so you have the mortal realm and the other world. Anytime that you want to create a magical effect, you have to tear a little hole between the 2 worlds and pull out a fragment of a person's or creature's soul, which you then refine into energy, which you can use to create magical effects. Additionally, sometimes if you're not casting a spell immediately, like casting your lightning bolt right now, you can instead use that energy and store it into a shard, which you can then carry with you and use it to create ritual effects or create magical objects, as well as they're used as trade material within the lore of the world, as in place of coinage. The system shows that government collects its tax in the form of souls and shards, fragments of souls, for the purpose of creating giant rituals to protect their cities. So they skip the process of having to collect coin and then transfer it into soul shards, since that is the product that you need in order to create giant rituals.
If I may kind of take a step back, since you have spent a lot of time playing role-playing games, how do you prepare for a session?
So for myself, I know I do things a little bit differently than most do. I don't really prepare. I have a general concept in mind of where I want the adventure to kind of go potentially, or what may be involved, and I just kind of wing it. A couple weeks ago when I was running the game, I was filling in for one of my guys who was sick that day. So on the drive-in, I decided today's going to be a wedding day. And then after I sat down and started introducing everyone to each other, I just kind of pieced together that they had to somehow escort a bride to a wedding at a distant location. And it's like, you know what? That's not challenging enough. And you're in the middle of a war zone. But it's okay. You can take the caves to your right, and they'll take you right past all the fighting. All you have to do is go through the deep, dark caves where you have no idea what's in there and nobody has a map. So I just kind of fill in whatever sounds interesting at the time. I play off of my players. If someone says something that they think is clearly what I'm thinking of and obviously what I meant to do, I say, yes, I was thinking of that. You're correct. Congratulations. That is what's happening to you now. I know a lot of my guys have a lot of preparation going into their stories and major activities prepared. One of my guys tends to replicate stories from video games that he likes to play and just try to make sure that not all the players at the table have already played that exact game, and different concepts. But for me, it really is just have fun with it and hope that it works out. And it usually does.
Sounds kind of like pretty much what I do as well, at least most of the time, because I just published a book a month or so ago about called The No Prep Game Master. So a lot of, I don't know, I just learned years ago that it was if I planned too much, it was just either nobody showed up or the campaign just couldn't go anywhere. So I wasted a lot of time, or I, kind of just railroad my players through my exact story that I wanted. So I just kind of gave that up and realized that just coming to the table with, an idea or two is usually plenty.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who does it. I haven't encountered a lot of people who at least have been willing to admit that.
Yeah. No, and I would say at least the few people that I've interviewed so far, you're about the only one other than myself that, at least admit to winging it. If a player can come to the table and maybe spend, between 20 minutes and a half hour creating a character, why should I spend more than 15 minutes thinking, or maybe even just, writing down a couple of notes right before the session begins if I had a cool idea about something? If you already have characters and the players, all they need to do is bring their character sheet to a session, why does the game master have to spend 10 hours during that week trying to come up with all these things? It's just, I think everybody should just be able to come to the table and play.
That is actually something I've seen scare people away from running game, as they've seen the amount of effort that some people put in. And for those people, I appreciate that effort. It does sometimes make for an amazing story, but I've never felt a lack of story even without proper preparation. And I don't want people to be afraid to just jump in and have fun with it.
I agree. Absolutely. And I've seen the same thing. It's just people are just like, oh, well, I don't have enough time to prepare to be the game master. And I just find that so sad, because especially when I was a teenager, because the first time I played D&D, I was 9, and, I played all while I was a teenager and everything, and played West End Star Wars game a lot. It's just over and over again, you hear just people just saying, oh, well, I don't have time to prepare to run a game, or I don't. And to me, it's just like, well, think about how much we've lost because those people just think, oh, well, it takes forever, when I was just running, my friends in Star Wars West End games by just having a map of Mos Eisley, and then just figuring out what's happening, is just like, as the players do stuff.
Yeah, the one thing I did realize after the first couple times doing that, I now do have one trick with my winging it. Every time I say a name, I write it down, because the players tend to ask that later. It's like, which person are we talking with? It's like, I have no idea. Oh, wait, I wrote it here. So if I am choosing to wing it, it is definitely essential that I write down all the major events that occur, as I can reference them, especially in the event where it's not a one shot and those things might come back to bite me next week.
Yeah. Taking notes is important. Most of the time, I just have my players take notes, and and they can remind me of the NPC, because that was one thing that I kind of got frustrated with, is when I was planning things, I would plan out a really cool NPC, and he or she would be this awesome character, and they would do something, and they would hold some maybe some piece or map or something for the quest to go on with, and my players would just not know their names, not care who they were, going with the no prep approach. If they're interested in an NPC, it just kind of grows organically, instead of me just trying to force one into the session. So yes, I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone. And if anybody's interested, they can check out my book, The No Prep Game Master. I give a lot of ideas on how to cut down your prep time. Some people, though, of course, they're, going kind of the wing it approach or the no prep approach. They're afraid that they just won't know what to say when the players ask like the million questions that players ask. How do you handle some of that?
So for me, that definitely came from experience. At this point, with, I believe, over a decade of gaming, it just kind of comes out without thinking about it anymore. Though I do remember it being much more challenging early on. So that's, of course, where I've seen lots of people use modules, and I am preparing modules myself, as I know that's a helpful resource for people. It's definitely nice to have something to fall back on when you are not in the mood or not interested in creating your own story. But for me, if I need an NPC and I just don't have something that perfectly fits the story, I just bring in one of my old characters, and I already have the personality developed because I played him for a year. I know the guy perfectly well. And if they have a random question and I don't have an answer for, it's like, well, the guy you're talking to doesn't know either. Good luck finding someone who does. They might find it 5 minutes later, and that gives me the time I need to make something up.
Yeah, I think people, can get just a little too uptight about some of the things. I think that if we learn how to just kind of keep things a little bit loose, the players should allow the game master 30 seconds to a minute to think about a few things every once in a while. They should kind of understand that the game master should already know going in that the players need certain information so that when they ask a question, I know years ago, I would become frustrated with like all these different questions. Well, I mean, the players need to know that information or they can't make decisions. So if they're asking questions, they're into the game. And so I think if the game master just relaxes a bit, you can find a number of different ways to answer the questions. I like to let the dice answer questions as well. I have
really,
have roll odd or even for yes or no. So if a character says, "Oh, is this door locked?" and I don't know what's behind the door yet because I'm winging it, so it doesn't matter to me that if it's locked or not. So I say, okay, roll a 6-sided die. Oh, you roll evens, it's unlocked. If you roll odds, it's locked. Just different things like that can answer all of these questions. And two, I think that the dice can take the story in just a ton of different ways that you just never think about. I like that. And I also use a system that I call best case, worst case, where if the players ask some kind of really important question, I have them roll a 6-sided die. And if they get a 6, that is their character's best case, and it is true. And if they get a 1, that is their character's worst case, and it is true. And in between, there's kind of a gradient effect. Some of okay in their favor, or getting progressively bad. That just takes the story in some, I've just seen it take the story in some incredibly fun and unique ways that I would have just never thought about. And since the player comes up with those situations, as a game master, I don't have to think about those things. I can just put those on the player, and I can be thinking about some other things at that same time.
I have to completely agree with you, and that is why we actually have built into the system the mechanic for luck.
Oh.
So it's actually an opposed roll. Mm-hmm. So the Soul Weaver will roll, the player will roll, and whoever wins gets to kind of figure out how lucky or unlucky the player was. So each character has an actual attribute dedicated towards luck, and the game master has to determine how likely or unlikely an event is to occur, which will determine how many dice the game master runs against the player. So that is definitely something that has come into play on numerous occasions.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. Now, you did mention that earlier, that there's a lot of opposed rolls instead of difficulty numbers in Soulshards. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So I've done my best to make the rules easy to learn. So anytime there are two different potential participants, whether it be a player and another player, a player and an NPC, or a player and the world itself, the Soul Weaver rolls for the world. And simply whoever rolls higher is successful. There are still certain target numbers involved, such as climbing or swimming, activities that are very mundane and aren't really sporadic. So they have that set number because if you can do them, you can. But if there is any kind of variation, you get to roll opposed. And it really helps simplify the rules that you just don't have to learn as many different things.
I guess, too, is the system roll over or roll under?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have to roll over a certain number, like higher than the other person, or do you have to roll low on the dice?
So you have to match the target number when there's a target number, or the attacker wins on a tie. So whoever rolls higher is the winner, but the offensive player will win if you actually have a match.
Okay,
But
so yeah.
yeah.
So it's a rollover system, yeah. So no, that's interesting. It's just certain systems, you have to a one is the best roll. In other systems,
no, high numbers are good.
Yeah.
And there is also one secondary type of roll. So your actions are determined by the highest number that you roll. Damage and healing rolls are made slightly differently in order to allow players to enjoy the extreme excitement of rolling 10 plus dice at once. So when first you make your attack roll to actually hit your foe. If you hit or you're targeting an ally to heal them, you then roll a bunch of dice based off of your amount. And each 6 or better results in 1 point actually applying to either the injury or healing amount. So you're looking for that pass-fail quantity. So you still get a relatively small number instead of if you have 10 dice every time, since you're looking for the highest number, you're always doing 12. That got kind of boring. Mm-hmm. So looking for the pass or fail gives you the chance to roll a lot of dice without always having that super high number result. Mm-hmm. Additionally, it still plays into the fact that it's a 12-sided die as opposed to just any other die that you can modify with certain effects that you need either a higher or lower number than that's target number 6. So there's room for it to grow or be penalized. And that way, players really like when they get to throw 15 dice at once, which occasionally happens.
I guess could you explain like the turns a little bit more, like how many actions a player gets or a character gets?
Yeah. So actions are kept to be pretty simple, and it's very comparable to your standard D&D and Pathfinder type actions. You have one prime action per turn, which will represent something like casting a spell or making a melee attack or ranged attack or whatnot. You have quick actions, which are determined off of your skills, and you can gain extras. Most players have an average of 2 unless they choose to increase it. It does have a 1 minimum unless you have taken some serious hindrances on your character. But quick actions will include anything such as opening a door, loading your bow, drawing an object from your pack, as well as any tricks or responses you learn. So if you learn an ability like deflect arrows, that uses up one of your quick actions. And if you have 3 quick actions, you can do that 3 times per turn, every turn. Or you can mix and match it with any of the other abilities that you have. There's also the legendary action, which inherently has absolutely no usage. But you can choose certain abilities that give you use of your legendary action, most of them being higher level abilities. So something that might actually just require level 4 or 24 abilities of a given category, or something crazy that's hard to get to, so that later in the game you unlock an additional action available to your character. And those actions are usually pretty significant. You can start with the early on one, the lowest level one you can get currently is Juggler. Draw 2 objects from your pack. Very simple, sometimes exactly what you need. Later on, the highest level one at level 12, you simply gain an additional prime action. Anything you want to do, that's what you get to do with it. And then, of course, movement is also part of your turn. Most characters have 4 or 5 speed. We play on a hex grid. You get to use your speed at any point during your turn. It is completely independent from the rest of your actions. So if you have a speed of 5, you want to move 1 space, attack, move 2 spaces, open a door, move 2 more spaces, you can do that.
Okay, that was actually going to be my next question. If it was played with a grid system or more theater of the mind.
Yeah, we definitely stick with as much hard printed information so that it is more versatile to people who haven't played role-playing games before. They don't have to learn the world entirely and can just jump in and know exactly what to expect. We've had a number of players who have never played role-playing games before participate, and they have no problem understanding the rules, which is really of significant importance, and they're able to see right there in front of them exactly what to do and how to do it.
Where are you going from here? Can people get the game now, or what's happening in the future?
So the game is currently entirely on the website, soulshardsrpg.com. We are not yet for sale, though hoping that if we can keep our current pace to get on Kickstarter or something like that next year. We have a number of plans involved for continuing to develop the system. Currently, we're working on refining all the abilities. Since we have so many, we want them to each be perfectly written and balanced, consistent in wording, trying to really make sure every one of them reads the way that it's intended, as every now and then there's a typo or a misunderstanding. We don't want to release too early and have mistakes in there. So we're kind of in our final stages of playtesting right now. We also need to start picking up some art, as currently we have only a couple pieces. So we don't want to release without that. One of the main reasons the book really is not purchasable is because it looks kind of boring without art in it. But we do have a number of other pieces to the project. As I mentioned earlier, the novel. We're also working on a board game version where you can effectively automate the Soul Weaver with a deck of cards. And you are more restricted in what you get, as your character development is done entirely through drawing from a deck of cards as well. But it's more open to people who haven't done role-playing games before and who want that confined environment and pre-built stories. We're also working on developing web tools to help with character creation and everything that you can possibly do at the table. We want to allow automation so that you can play online without having to go to a physical table. As we know, there are many people who simply cannot participate because of location. So we are working on building the program that allows you to set up an online Soul Weaver who can then invite players to be part of the party. Each player can view each other's character sheets, view modifiers applied by a single player. So if someone casts haste on the party, everyone sees it apply on their character sheet, so you know exactly what you've gained. And then actually put a hex grid in front of the players where they can indicate where their character is and move around and whatnot, so that hopefully the game just becomes fully accessible, so easy to play for everyone.
Okay. Wow. Well, you have a lot of pieces to this entire project.
Yes.
With a board game, a novel, a role playing game, web tools. That is, it's quite ambitious, and so I wish you the best of luck. So
that's why I don't do it alone. I've got a lot of people working with me right now. The development team is always growing.
So I will link up your website in the show notes to this episode at dicegeeks.com, so everybody can kind of go over there and check it out if they want to learn more. I just want to thank you, Yitzi, for being on the show today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Yitzi. As I mentioned, I have provided links to his RPG in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. If you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You will find 10 free dungeon maps plus some other RPG resources that you can use in your campaigns. And as a bonus, you will never miss an episode of this show. Also, if you would like me to keep doing these interviews and keep producing this show on a weekly basis, please head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and consider supporting the show. Any support that I receive on Patreon is just simply a vote of confidence, so I know that you enjoy this show and you want me to keep producing it. I thank you for listening today. Until next time, keep gaming.